Hello, welcome to Comfy Cozy Up. So today for Readsoullit, I will be talking about romance novel by African American authors. So I love romance novel, and I read pretty much a lot of different niche in that area. You know, the historic romance, the average and contemporary, a bit of erotica. There's also some Christian romance novel that you can also find, and a sports one. And I find myself just reading anything that seems interesting, and usually I give it a chance. And so far, I've read some good ones. So I'm gonna start off with a historic romance novel, and this author is known for that, and that's Beverly Jenkins. She is known for her retro cover. Her covers are very much kind of like the 80s, but because of the historic period that she writes about, it's fitting. And I love that she still maintained that kind of cover even to now. So the book I remember the most is Forbidden, and that book I read about 2 years ago. And this is a story about a man who is a former slave, but he lives his life as a white man, and he's able to be successful, have wealth in a mining town. And he did this without thinking twice until a black woman came in the picture, and he fell for her. And he had to decide whether or not he wants to disclose who he is in order to be with her. That would be jeopardizing everything that he worked for in order to get where he's at. Love this story. It was interesting. There was some of it that I felt was questionable because that time period, but it still drew me to the story. It still kept my attention, and I read this story pretty quickly, and I realized that she's good. This is her niche. So the next author I would like to talk about is DANIELLE Allen, and DANIELLE Allen is not well known like Beverly Jenkins is. However, she's getting there because she is one of those authors that knows how to end a book. She takes risks. It's not your typical fairy tale story, your happy ending that you would expect. And sometimes it doesn't work. But I do like the fact that she is creative and she finds a way to keep her audience engaged in her story, because you never know what you're going to get towards the end. And one of the recent books that I read from her just released last month, which is Broken Clocks. And I remember thinking, okay, what she's going to do with this book. And she really went there. I cried. This is such an emotional story that will literally have you feel in a certain way where you want the fairy tale, but it still was beautiful how she decided to end the story. And I love this. And I do recommend that book. I think it's a book that it's a well done romance novel that is not overly sex, but there's a great storyline, and there's a connection that you will have with the characters. So definitely pick that one up. Now the next author, after reading her second book, I decided to look her up, and that's when I realized, oh, she's African American. Didn't know. The cover of this book wouldn't have let me know she was African American. So I loved this book. It is probably one of my top favorite romance novels of all time, and it's called The Silent Waters. And this book dealt with mental health, and it started from a 10-year-old girl who was robbed of her innocence, and she never recovered quite until she was way in her adult life. She went through a period of time where she didn't speak. She didn't leave her house. Everything that is outside her doors was reminding her of that day when everything went wrong. And in this story, a little boy who she grew up with was there the whole time supporting her. He visited her. He had a connection with her. So this is a story, even though she's not speaking, she's not talking, there's still a communication because she communicates with all her other senses besides verbal. And I think it was an interesting way that she's able to do the story of a character who is broken and is suffering from a very traumatic incident and still able to love and find love. And the male character in this book, you really felt for him because she was a part of his life throughout all of this, even though he couldn't do anything with her. He couldn't take her out. He couldn't help her, in essence, the way that he thought he could. But he helped her in another way, in a way where it didn't involve the typical communication. There's time where she just needed him to just be there in her space. And it was just beautiful. And I love this story. It's a very emotional story, and it really did a good job dealing with mental health. And I highly recommend it. The next one I want to talk about is a new one that I read end of last year, and it's from, this author is Xyla Turner. And what I love about Xyla Turner is she touched on every social topic you probably could think of. She is that author that is more realistic in terms of what she does because she touched on everything. She touched on the Black Lives Matter. She touched on someone who's have a STD and living with it for, and still trying to find love. She touched on body image. She touched on self-love. Her book are women who are dealing with complicated things and still being able to find love in the midst of all of that. And she is that author that if it's something going on in the media, in social event, I'm guarantee you she's going to come out with a book that is of surrounding that topic. And she has done that. And one of the books that I love is her short series where it's In Her Shoes. And she has one in March in Her Shoes and Strut in Her Shoes. And I love this because she took stories from a counseling group that deal with women with different issues. And in each story, there's an issue that the woman is dealing with and how she's able to navigate through that issue and still find love. And not just find love with a man, but also find love with herself. And that's really important, and I think she did a really good job with these short stories. And for the other books that I want to talk about are more of the erotica. So if you want to read more the kinky, out there stuff, we have Zane, and we also have Mary B. Morrison. And these authors are very much kinky, very much less of romance, but more of a sexual kind of relationship. So if you're looking for that kind of book, yeah. Also, if you're looking for short stories, and these are short stories that I feel like are great for someone who doesn't read a lot of romance but would like to try. And then you have Nia Forster, and she has several short stories that you could read that that you will really enjoy. And we also have Kirby Elaine, and she wrote a book called Pieces of Me, and I remember that book so much because it always reminded me of the cafe that I spent a lot of time at. And I remember writing a blog post about the silly things a book make you do, and it's something that happened in this book that I always laugh about and remember vividly because it really is that kind of story that you do not need to read the synopsis at all. If you do, it's going to ruin it for you. Don't do it. But I do recommend Pieces of Me. It's a beautiful story. So that's all the books I'm going to talk about. There are, of course, so many African-American romance novel authors out there. And I'm sure there's, people have their favorites. And if you do, put it in the comment section. I would love to check out other romance novels by African American women and men. I don't have any men on here. I've read a few books by African American men. However, they weren't my favorite, so this is why I didn't recommend. But I'm still interested in some besides, Eric Jerome Dickey, where he's not really a romance novel author, but once in a while he might write a steamy romance novel. And there's probably a few others that I am just not aware of. But if you do know any of, leave it in the description box. And thanks for checking out my video. So I hope you guys having a good day, and bye.